everything works. Little delay on my end.
Okay. Looks like we're on.
Okay. Yep, it looks like we're on. I was going to do a countdown, but the countdown does not want to cooperate with me, so that's okay. Everybody, I want to welcome Michelle. Sorry about that. It looks like we're going over the thing here. It just decided to start on me. I'm stopping it, though. I apologize about that. I have a little rough start once in a while on my shows. So I had a delay, and then the countdown just started. But anyway, welcome to the show, Michelle. It's so nice to have you here. I've been going over your research on your channel. I am very new to your channel. However, I'm not new to the information. I've been doing a lot of this research on my end here. And there's a lot I want to get into today. We were just talking off camera about a few things that we're going to get into here. But before we dive deep into everything, I'm sure everybody here knows who you are, but if you can give everybody just maybe a brief bio on how you got started on this information, how you got started on YouTube. I know you've been on for 3 years now, and let's just hear your story.
Sure. The quick version is I was born in 1963. And my birthday's on Monday. I'll be 58. So I came in right before John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And my parents tell me I was in D.C. at the time of the funeral. You know, what, 3 or 4 months old, something like that. And so I grew up outside of D.C. in Rockville, Maryland, Montgomery County, and had a fairly conventional upbringing. Middle-class family. Both my parents were teachers. I remember a good childhood, and nothing too out of the ordinary. Knowing what I know now, I really feel blessed that I did have a relatively normal childhood in a lot of ways. And I really think I started noticing anomalies when I was quite young. And so, as I was saying before we went live, I really feel like I was born to do this, because for me to wake up to it at all is miraculous. There was nothing in my upbringing that would have prepared me for this. So
now, what triggered you to wake up? What was that one anchor event, the thing that you looked at that one day where it just clicked for you and you're like, ah?
I would say it was a lifelong process and things that I started noticing. And I'll give you an example that I have on my website, on my pinned blog. My dad played softball for the Twinbrook Baptist Church, and I would go to the practices or the games, whatever, and I was totally bored. I didn't give a flip about watching the softball practice or the game. Mm-hmm. And then I went to I would go down in the side. There was a path that went down into the woods, and there were these really big stones at the bottom of this hill. And it was really cool there. Didn't think anything of it then, but once I started doing the research, I thought back, and I was like, okay, this is a part of the puzzle. Big stones in a part of Rockville, where I grew up, called Twinbrook, that was part of Rock Creek Park. And again, as I was starting to connect the dots, they tell us in the names that all the rocks around Rock Hill. Point of Rocks is in Western Maryland on the way to Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. Stony Creek, Stony Brook, you name it. They're telling us, again, this is all hidden in plain sight. And, I'm sure we'll cover other aspects of it in this interview today. But I was about 7 or 8 when I had that realization. And then where I grew up in Rockville, the house was sitting on the flattest part of called Lindley Terrace, and there was a golf course behind our house, and then on down this terrace, there was this really huge curve.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're flat. And then as you went further on down the street, the backyards at the, let's call it the boomerang of this place, was really steep. And then it went on. So now I really think I grew up on top of a flat top pyramid,
Oh yeah, maybe.
without realizing it. So
we're all living on top of something, it seems. I'm picking up like red brick out back in my house, that little red bricks.
Exactly. I mean, when I first started waking up to this aspect of the information when I was living in Oklahoma, my brother is a professor in Shawnee, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is where I woke up to this, Oklahoma, and then traveling to Arkansas and Louisiana. And he had, these megalithic stones in his yard, lying around randomly. And I can guarantee you, I mean, and that's another calling card. They're just on beside the road, in the grassy area between the sidewalk and the street. You'll see block shaped and cut stones.
Mm-hmm.
And just lying around, we don't see them. We're not dialed into them. They're not supposed to be there. So we just walk on past.
Ride right past them. Yeah.
And don't even think about it. And doing the research that I've been doing extensively for 3 years, you see megalithic stone blocks in canal systems and in inner city areas where the rivers will go through.
Yes.
And they have masonry banks, and it's just everywhere, but we're not taught about it. We're not supposed to see it. They've gone to great lengths. And when I say they, I mean the controllers. And yes, I believe they're real. That's one name for them. It's a nice name for them.
Yeah.
They don't want us to know. And they've done everything they possibly can do to dumb us down and keep us at a lower level of consciousness and cloud our consciousness with alcohol and different kinds of drugs, whether prescribed or not. They just made that.
Entertainment seems to be a drug as well, because you're so distracted with entertainment and gaming that you don't see the brick wall right in front of you. You know what I mean? That the geologists are telling you is a natural formation that took millions of years to form.
Yeah. And, and again, that's part of the story too. Now I'm not a gamer, but I understand there's truth in a lot of the video games. They've got stuff tucked away in there too.
Oh, yeah.
Because they are required to tell us. But I really believe that they went through all of this trouble. And by that, I mean that I believe that the cataclysm, which is called the mud flood, was deliberately caused. I absolutely believe that, because if it wasn't, nobody would be here. It would have been an extinction level event, and, we'd probably be living in caves and hunting and gathering if there had been a natural event.
Right.
But I think the original civilization was wiped out, that a lot of the history that we're taught is actually about this reclamation of the original civilization and then getting it restarted. There's a lot of infrastructure underground.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so survivors could have lived there and controllers could have lived there. So it's not like there wasn't any place for them to go until they got enough of the original civilization dug out to restart it. And so like when you see photographs of early trolley cars being pulled by mules and horses, they were using that until they could get it electrified again.
Right.
And then within 30 years, they started to take out the streetcars because they had cars and buses by that time. And, subways, I think the same thing. I think all of that was part of the original infrastructure: subways, railroads, streetcars.
Absolutely.
You name it. And so to get back to my story a little bit, I was, even though it was hard to access alternative information in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up, I loved shows like In Search Of, when it came out with Leonard Nimoy.
Yes.
I loved In Search Of, Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack. I would watch that religiously. And I didn't care much about the other programs on TV, but I liked those. And then Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. I remember some episodes from that where I'm like,
So you've always had this curiosity, always had this, and I find that with a lot of people who've been traveling down this road of truth, is that we all have come from that place of curiosity and the mysteries, the unsolved mysteries, and these enigmas, and JFK assassination, the conspiracy theory topics, which I don't think conspiracy theory is a bad term. They've just demonized it, and people are conditioned now to think that this is a bad term. But you have to have theories, and there are conspiracies out there. So, I mean, it's just a part of the process of figuring out what's going on in whatever situation. And in our situation, it's the whole world, the world that we live in. And we've been lied to on every level. And
And it's because their crimes against humanity are so huge. They just want to keep, taken from the gravy train and never be held accountable for what they've done. That's all they want. They are predators. They're parasites. They can't survive without us. They hate us, but they need us.
Yes.
And so, it's kind of like cat and mouse almost with us.
Well, let me throw this at you. Just since I have it on the top of my head and you mentioned it. When we look at the grid system, and we're going to get back to the rest of your story here, but when you look at the grid system and the way it's laid out like a circuit board, we are key components on that grid. They need us on the grid. If you look at the ghost towns and the cities in China that nobody's inhabiting now, they're like dead cities right now. They're not operational. They're not functioning grid systems without us. They need our energy.
And I wasn't necessarily going to go into it in this one, but I've kind of landed on the idea that the division of North into South, like during the Civil War, like North Korea and South Korea, like North Vietnam and South Vietnam, finding out from somebody else there was a North and South in Bhutan, which is in the Himalayas near Nepal and Tibet. I just did research on Yemen. I was telling you I was doing research in the 1990s in Yemen, North and South. And if you look at batteries, a battery has a North Pole and a South Pole.
Yes.
And opposites attract. And what's the other way? Like repels.
Yes.
So you have to have opposites in order to have that attraction. And so they are energizing us or charging us to do their dirty work by creating artificial differences between the same people so that the same people end up killing each other off.
Right.
And I'm seeing that pattern repeated over and over and over again. And a lot of times it involves children. Children are not immune from these wars, major wars, civil wars around the world. There's a lot more than people realize because there's just no attention paid to them. But you see that in Africa and the Middle East. I mean, the European colonial powers, which I believe that the 13 bloodlines, for the most part, incarnated into. I've done some research on that, and that's available on some of my videos on my blog. I think there's these limited lineages that they're in, and they so they created the conditions for this, and they created the colonialism, and then the colonial powers went in and took over the administration of numerous countries for many, many years. And then these countries were finally, like in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, granted independence. And then the conditions for division had been created by the colonial powers. And then they descend into civil war for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I've been studying this pretty intensively here lately, and that pattern is repeated over and over again.
Yeah, so we're just getting out of Afghanistan. Like we've been in there for like 10, 15 years, and then the whole Iraq thing and everything. And I see what you're saying with this pattern.
So they're using us to meet their goals of destruction.
Yes,
of
and I just read The Secret Covenant yesterday or the day before on Miss May's show. And in The Secret Covenant, whether people want to believe that it's a real thing or not, it lines out everything that we're talking about right now. And it says that we will have them kill each other when it suits us, and from their labors, and their toils, we will rise as the rulers. So, I mean, they've and it's been going on since day one of the reset.
which I believe was in the 1800s.
I agree with you 100%.
I think the official kickoff was the Crystal Palace exhibition in 1851, but the reset really got ramped up starting in 1830, and it went on probably through the early to mid 1900s. I see the wars being the explanation for the star forts having been built. And then they became military targets for destruction. And I think the star forts were actually batteries and part of the circuitry of this grid system. And that's probably a good lead in to talk about my own original research. So I watched those programs as a kid, and then with the internet, thankfully other sources of information became available. And one of them is if you look up megalithomania.co.uk or .uk.co, one of the two. But if you look up megalithomania, there are some excellent presenters there that I started watching the conferences in 2011. And so I'm watching them. I'm reading books like Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock, the Orion, I want to say it's called The Orion Theory by Robert Bauval and Adrian Gilbert. Let's see who else. Barbara Hand Clow is another person that I read. There's just scads of people that I was reading their work that I probably would not have gotten to where I am without them. What they did was gave me this foundation of a lot of dowsers following Earth energy lines, doing the research, finding the same thing in Turkey and South America.
Yes.
That was part of the journey. Another part of the journey was learning about Drunvalo Melchizedek's work around 2007, 2008, and the Flower of Life.
I remember that.
and sacred geometry, and watching his stuff. And then he talked about a physical grid, in something he put out in 2010 called Birth of a New Humanity. And you can find it on YouTube, Birth of a New Humanity, Drunvalo Melchizedek.
Yes.
And he talked about this. And at the time I'm thinking, well, that sounds great, but who could have done that? And so that planted the seed. So I was ready when I was living in Oklahoma, and I went traveling with some friends, and one of my friends gave me a map that I kept on my dining room table. And as I was eating and looking at it, I started noticing cities lining up in lines. And because I knew about sacred geometry, I was able to find a star tetrahedron by connecting the major cities of North America.
So let me ask you this. All right, so they show the globe with the ley lines on it going all around it. We take the globe and you flatten it down to a flat realm. It looks like the flower of life pattern, the ley lines. And you were saying that these cities are set up on these ley lines pretty much, right? These energy grids. Okay.
I believe it's laid out on the flower of life, sacred geometry.
Absolutely. I had mentioned that a couple of years ago, that when you take the grid, the ley line grid off the globe and smash it down flat, it's going to be the flower of life pattern. It's pretty amazing.
And I think it works both ways. So my work is not driven by whether the Earth is a plane or a planet. I have found some interesting evidence and support that our perception of space and time has been tampered with, and that they turned flat maps into globes starting in the 1500s. And then some other things. But it's still not what drives my work. What I'm most interested in is this original civilization, how beautiful it was, how integrated it was, what happened to it, and how it was covered up, and how it affects us today.
Yes.
And I found that information out. It started to become clear to me when I was doing alignments. So I took this. I had to switch to a globe. I put the same star tetrahedron on a globe because I couldn't see the other side of the map. This is a flat map. I couldn't see the other side of it. So, for my own, I'm not a mathematician. I'm into it, but I couldn't figure out the other side. So when I switched to a globe and I started following cities and places that lined up, I got about, this is 18, 19 pages of cities and places in alignment. And a lot of my research is based on just following these places around the world. And I've got things called circle alignments on the planet Algiers, where I mapped out a circle that started and ended in Algiers, Algeria. Same thing with Amsterdam Island, which is a tiny little speck in the South Indian Ocean. I was able to find a circle with that. And then off of Merida, Mexico, I was able to find a circle on that. I followed these places, and then there are some other long distance alignments, like how I found the Silk Road, and I was following an alignment that emanated off of North America and came back to North America.
So you're talking about like Silk Roads, like trade routes and stuff.
I'm talking about cities that they were built in alignment with each other. I'm saying according to the Flower of Life. I would believe it was all laid out according to sacred geometry. Now, I also believe it's laid out according to the stars and astronomical events, because there are cities that are lined up on eclipse paths perfectly. And the same cities have the same eclipses however many years apart.
Yeah. They always say like, oh, well, there's going to be an eclipse, but you can only see it in Germany and France and Spain or something across that area. You know what I mean? Is that what you're talking about?
Okay. Exactly. So it's like the ancient builders. And when I say ancient, I don't mean they built this a long time ago and then let it go. I'm saying these ancient builders lived up until relatively recently. And then that was when the timeline was hijacked and everything was reset. Mm-hmm. So there was this ancient, highly advanced human civilization that was worldwide. And I'm saying I believe it goes back to Lemuria, and that it was Lemuria through Atlantis up until the present day. And that's where you get the word Moor from, because Moor is based on M-U'-U-R, Moor. So this ancient civilization goes way back. They knew exactly where they were on the planet, what they were doing, had these peaceful empires that weren't at war with each other. This same infrastructure, same style, same everything exists all over the earth. Right. And the controllers have spent a hell of a lot of time destroying a lot of this infrastructure, so you would never know it.
Absolutely.
And then I think that's what the world wars were about. Mm-hmm. And I think that was what Vietnam was about. And I wanted to bring in my experience watching Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World into my current research, because I remember an episode about where he was talking about the plain of jars in Laos. And come to find out, Laos is per capita the most bombed country in history.
Wow.
Right next to Vietnam. And because of the excuse of the Pathet Lao, the communist Lao shooting an American plane, the country gets the hell bombed out of it for the next 8 years. One of the places that got hit hard was the Plain of Jars. So why were they so intent on destroying a megalithic site?
Yeah.
And if you look at pictures of the Plain of Jars, some of them are quite huge. I mean, I don't think people really know what they were used for, but it covers a big area in Laos, and it was a regular bombing target.
Wow, that's very interesting.
And there's still unexploded bombs over there today. Wow. So to me, it looks like the history was about our history. The history we've been taught was about destroying a lot of this original infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And even though we still live and work inside this infrastructure, much of it still works. It's our big museums and libraries and government buildings and courthouses and state buildings. Yeah. Those domed Capitol buildings exist all over the world.
Yeah, exactly the same.
Exactly the same. Sometimes in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
If you look up the capital of Palau, it's in Malikiak. There's this huge Capitol building. I mean, I think the Republic of Palau has maybe 20,000 people.
Wow.
And it was said to have been built like within the last couple of decades.
Wow.
So I mean, it's just this, it just doesn't make sense.
I think some of these closed countries like North Korea and, Russia and China was kind of closed for a while, and all this stuff, like we didn't really know what was going on over there is because of the stuff that they got going on in those countries that they have to hide from people. Like North Korea had that one big hotel that originally looked like it came out of a mud flood. There was a huge pile of mud up the backside of this thing, and they supposedly said it was abandoned for quite some time during the construction, and then they refinished it later on. Yeah. But this was definitely something left over, and they built a whole city around this thing. It's so massive. I can't think of the name of the hotel, but it's in North Korea. It's a big pyramid looking thing, and it's crazy looking.
There's a lot of megalithic type architecture and so forth in North Korea and in South Korea both. And unfortunately, the secret societies and the intelligence agencies, maybe at least the rogue parts of them, have been very involved in this behind the scenes plot about how to control humanity. And unfortunately, like we talked about, it involves drugs, it involves alcohol, it involves, hurting people, and worse. And that's the reality of the world we live in. And I'm a very loving, caring person by nature. I don't want this to be true.
Yeah, I hear you.
And that's why I say, I mean, I didn't have the perfect parents. I had a relatively stable upbringing. My parents did the best that they could. I would say more like emotionally stunted than anything. I mean, they never really knew how to parent. And I'll be 60 in 2 years, and I'm, still treated like I'm 10. Like they. So, but I'm very grateful that I did not have a different life experience, because it could have been so much worse.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about the human trafficking, adults and children, and the things that are happening to children, and human beings, all human beings that we don't know about.
Yeah.
It's very scary. It's very sickening. Yeah. And, it's what we have to wake up. They can only do it if we give them our consent. And if we don't act or say anything, we're consenting to it.
Exactly. And the fact that we, pretend, people like, well, I don't really know about that. I don't know if it's true or whatever. If you don't do the research and find out for yourself that this is really going on, and you're just going to stay willfully ignorant to the situation, then you're giving them your consent. You're turning a blind eye.
With the internet, even though I was telling you earlier, and I'll go into this later in the show, the internet was developed to control us, but we've used it to free us. Mm-hmm. But where the internet is, you can Google anything. So if you can Google child sex trafficking, you can Google ninth circle sacrifice circle, you can Google adrenochrome.
Right.
And you can find information. It's there. Even if you're inclined not to believe it.
Right.
You can find it.
Yes.
And you've got plenty of fact checkers there that are going to say, oh, no, that's not happening.
Yeah.
And they exist to plant a seed of doubt in your mind, so you're not going to believe what's actually happening.
Because some people don't want to believe it. And if they get a fact checker that comes in the back door and says, oh, fact check, this isn't, whatever, then they'll be okay with that because the fact checker said so. And then they can move on with their lives. Just that's that one little seed of doubt. But even though all the information's there, it's a reputable site. They have all the links to things that you can go dig in yourself even further and research it out. but people don't want to take the time to do that. They just want to move on with their lives. They're too busy. They can't stop and think about anything, critically think anything out. They're on that rat race wheel, constantly going, or stuck to their phone. When they have 5 minutes of free time, they're entertaining themselves somehow instead of researching this stuff.
Mm-hmm. And so you can look up adrenochrome. It is a very highly charged drug that comes from the adrenal glands of traumatized children right before they're killed. And so I'm just saying that because we're talking about seriously horrific stuff. And it's a drug that the elites use. The world runs on the blood of children, and it really does. And that's all been masterfully kept hidden from us because we don't want to believe.
Yeah.
Do not want to believe that this could even be possible or happen.
Yep.
And if I wasn't awake to a lot of other things, I mean, I really started waking up starting around 2006. I wouldn't know.
That's really.
I would be like,
Yeah, that's really
want to know.
I woke up in 2005, so we're right paralleling each other with this type of information and stuff. For me, in 2005, I accidentally clicked on 9/11 Mysteries at 10:30 at night out of the blue. Wasn't looking for it or nothing. I was looking at volcanoes, actually. And we are going to get to volcanoes in this live stream today because I really want to hear your take on those. I feel like I've come full circle now because now I'm back at volcanoes and finding out that they're not what they've told us. But yeah, so it's very interesting that you say you started to wake up in 2006. That's cool.
I think I'd been aware before that, and I had always been tuned into out of place things in the environment.
Right.
So I traveled to England for the first time in 2010. So this was after I had learned about the flower of life and sacred geometry, and my mother's dad's family had immigrated from Bradford on Avon in England. And I went to see the threshing barn, which was a place that was in some genealogical records that my mom had. And it's a beautiful, big building, beautifully made stone building. And as I was exiting, I happened to look to my left, and there was a partial flower of life carved on the side.
Oh, wow.
Make a mental note to myself. It's like, okay, what's that doing there? And then I grew up in Maryland and went to college outside of Baltimore, real close to it, and Ellicott City was nearby. And then a couple of years ago, I was in the area because one of my better friends' daughter was getting married, and I was in Ellicott City, just looking around, killing time. And there was a big megalithic stone in the rock work as I was passing by. I wish I'd taken a picture of it, but I'm looking at that. And I'm, what is that there? And other things like that, where like I had this catalog of things in my head. I'm not going to say I have a photographic memory, but I have a good memory, and I have really good pattern recognition skills, which have really helped me with the work that I've been doing, because it's in the pattern recognition that a lot of information is there. So they can take the true history out of the written record, which they have.
But you can't take the pattern.
But you can't take the fact that there are these massive buildings of stonework that don't fit the historical narrative we've been given in terms of technology up until the present day. And we can't even build like that anymore. I mean, they tear down the stone buildings and they replace it with wood buildings.
Yeah, or like glass and metal, and that's it. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, the quality is far inferior, but then these original buildings also had a purpose on the grid system.
Yes.
Because everything was situated and placed absolutely perfectly for a particular purpose.
Yeah, that's what I try to explain that to people, that, with this Capitol building or this, I'm like, these buildings, most of them were not even meant to be lived in or nothing. They're components on the grid system. They have a functionality to the grid.
They were lined up astronomically to equinoxes and solstices and full moons. And, you see that with lighthouses, you see that with Capitol buildings, you'll see the, the moon lined up perfectly with the antiquitech of a Capitol building. So everything was lined up perfectly, and I believe it was benevolent. And when the controllers came in, they just reverse engineered it to become a control system.
Yeah.
So you have
it's an inversion. It's a complete inversion what they've done. They've taken everything that was beautiful, clean energy, abundance for everybody. Everybody had everything they needed. There was a symphony of vibes going through the atmosphere constantly. It was a beautiful state to be in, mentally and physically, I feel. And they've completely inverted it across the board.
And that's what cathedrals were places of healing.
Mm-hmm.
And geometry, and the organs were part of that, and it was putting out these frequencies, the solfeggio frequencies, different frequencies that were all designed to kind of balance and harmonize. And I really have come to believe that the bell towers, known as carillons or campaniles or campanilan, I can't even say it. Anyway, the tall bell towers, I think, were broadcasting these beautiful frequencies out to the universe. And I think the Earth was a very important place with regards to the whole big picture. And humanity was very important within that. But because we're in physical form, it was easy for darkness to come in, however they did this. And I have some theories about that, but they came in, wiped everything clean, have given us a false history, false identity, taught us to worship them instead of recognizing our own powers as spiritual beings, and with a direct connection to God or Source or the Almighty or however you want to call it, to keep us from recognizing that, because number one, they can't touch us. Number two is they want to control us. They want to control everything through us, and that's why
they want us to seem to give them control of us. It's like
we have to, like I said, we have to consent.
Yeah,
because this is a free will place.
And look at the jab. Just saying the jab, for instance. Everybody's like, "Oh, the pressure's on. The pressure's on." Yeah, they're going to pressure, but they can't force you. If they say, "Well, you're going to need this jab to come work here now," well, you don't have to work there anymore. You can very easily go get a job somewhere else. But if you're conditioned and relaxed and set in your ways of working there for 18, 20 years or something, well, then you'll give up your free will and you'll go along and do it. You know what I mean? Or you'll hear a constant barrage of information on the televised to your vision about, this is going on. You have to have it over here. You can't get into this place unless you have it. But yet nobody's come to your door. Nobody's put a gun to your head and said you need, and they're holding you down, sticking it in your arm. It's all based on free will. Oh, hi, Kitty.
That's Charlie.
Hey, Charlie.
We've just been moved in a little less than a week, so he's still excited, getting used to it.
That's cool.
So that's all part of another agenda. They've had to speed up their agenda. This was supposed to take over a period of years, and a lot of things have come out to the, public view, and more people are waking up, and they're kind of panicking. So you have a percentage of the population that has heard the narrative and the fear that's been pushed and everything else, and go for it, and I will never take it. It's a bioweapon. It changes your DNA. It's not for our good, and all of this has been pushed to get us to take that so that they can further control us.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. 100%.
So that's a lot. That's what that's about. And again, thankfully for the internet, and thankfully for communities like this one, and people waking up and being ready for the information. Because if you know somebody or have a family member, I do not recommend, red pilling if they're not ready.
Yeah.
It's more traumatic and more painful if you're waking up and you're already becoming aware that something's wrong, and that you're realizing that there's a discrepancy between what we've been told and what's actually there, that it's, they're not ready for it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you should stop learning and looking and educating yourself. And what I like to tell people is you can just go outside your front door and start doing your own research in your own community. And I
Yeah.
guarantee you will find things.
Absolutely.
Start anywhere. Start at the local creek or the local river or the local church or the local courthouse, or the local library, especially if you live in an older town.
Yeah, this is like my co-host Steve JMO, who's usually on with me. He lives in Springfield, Mass, and he's always going around to different cemeteries and different towns in his area, down in creek beds and everything. Because, well, once you know what you're looking at, it's everywhere. It's all around us. And he's been doing a lot of that boots on the ground exploring in his area, and I've done it here in my area, gone up to Mount Cheeha, which they call it a mountain, but it's clearly a melted building. I found mortar lines everywhere up there. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, if you just start going out in your own area, even if you look at some houses in your area that are supposedly from the 1800s, I did that recently. I talked to a lady who lives in a house that was supposedly built in 1889. I feel like it was inhabited in 1889 with the new his story, because clearly this is a pre-X Factor house, pre-reset house, has heat damage all over it, 15-foot ceilings, 10-foot high doors. I mean, it clearly made for larger people. All this type of stuff, and that's not even a mile away from me.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to go far. I'm not kidding. You don't have to go to another country.
No.
It's all the same. This was a remarkable and unified civilization, and something happened to it. And there's a lot of different theories as to what might have caused the mud flood. It could have been a series of events, I think within a specified period of time. But if you Google mud flood, you'll get all kinds of pictures. And I didn't know about it before I started. So I had been doing my research, I guess, for about 6 months, and I started turning my blog post into videos almost right away, because I got a subscriber, and I thought, well, because I had made one video. I was just planning on making one video, and then I thought, well, I guess I can just turn these into videos. And so that's what I started to do. And somebody connected me with the somebody in the mud flood community. And so I watched his video, and he was looking around his hometown in Baltimore, or where he's living. I don't think it's where he's originally from, Baltimore Fats. And I watched his first videos, and he had just started his YouTube channel like I had just a few months before, and doing his own research and asking questions. And I noticed that we were building the same, watching the same buildings, looking at the same buildings. And so once I learned about the mud flood and started looking into it, I realized it was all part of this. And it's very much been a part of my beliefs as to what's taken place. And as I do my own research, following the alignments, and then I followed up on a lot of people's suggestions, and that's part of what I want to go into today. Mm-hmm. I've been taken to places I wouldn't have looked at otherwise. And, again, the evidence of mud flood is right there. And typically in buildings that are still standing, you'll see like a slanted street, and the windows start small and get bigger and bigger and bigger as you go down the street.
Yeah.
And then you look at old pictures and you see where, they dug out a certain amount, and that's where the lines are. There's
right.
a church in Omaha that's like that. I want to say it's St. Mary Magdalene or something like that, where there's a clear example of what it looked like before, meaning after the mud flood, and after, which is after it became a working street.
Right.
It's a church in Omaha.
Yeah, I was shocked when I saw when I came onto the mud flood stuff, and I saw those pictures for the first time, like when they dug away the Capitol building in Washington. You can see there's a whole couple of levels down there, or these other buildings in other countries where they've ripped out the street and the sidewalks, and you could just see like goes down another, couple of stories. Who knows how far down these things go? There's a lot going on underground that they're not telling us about. That's for sure.
For sure. And then the other thing, since you mentioned it, like the Jefferson Memorial, the Lincoln Memorial, the Supreme Court, were all said to have been built in the early 20th century. So you've got massive, massive buildings that look like ancient, what we are told is ancient Greek and Roman architecture, having been built like in the middle of World War I, in the middle of the Depression. Like the Supreme Court building off the top of my head was said to have been built during the Depression.
Yeah.
And again, if you look at the Supreme Court building, that building is huge. I think the Jefferson Memorial was said to have been built, the World War I falls in there somewhere. Actually, let me look it up real quick for accuracy's sake, because hard to rely on memory of some of these things sometimes. So the Jefferson Memorial was said to have been, so it was said to have been built between 1939 and 1943. Now, this is Wikipedia.
So 4 years they built this building.
Between 1939 and 1943, which would have been in the middle of World War II, according to this article. And that's Wikipedia.
And
so anyway, I just looked up Jefferson Memorial and picked up on the Wikipedia entry, and it says between 39 and 43 is when it was built.
Right.
So I'm just, using those as examples to say it doesn't add up.
No, it doesn't.
What they're telling us.
San Francisco doesn't add up.
Like they're kind of winging it and making it up as they go along, and who's going to go and check?
Yeah, I just did a piece on Julia Morgan. She's accredited with designing, first woman architect, first off, and accredited with designing over 700 buildings, all in California. And a lot of them are in San Francisco as well, but all up and down California. And the time frame that they give for this woman and her architectural design stuff, it's just like, it doesn't make sense. It's impossible.
The same thing is true with Frederick Law Olmsted's work, is true with Henry Hobson Richardson. They're credited with being these geniuses, and their work's all over the place.
Yeah.
And it was like mid to late 1800s, early 1900s. And then you have Richardson, who died young, he died in his 40s. But he's got this whole style named after him, and he was said to have designed all these buildings. Same thing with federal buildings. There was a supervising architect, James Taylor Knox, who had all of these federal buildings to his credit as some form of involvement, usually supervising other people. But again, there's this like flurry of activity in the late 1800s, early 1900s to build this this federal architecture that looks like the biggest temple that you've ever seen in ancient Rome, probably even bigger than the biggest temple that we see in Rome today, that are all over the place, that aren't recognized because they're not supposed to be there.
You just don't talk about them.
And why would they lie to us?
Exactly. So
why would they lie to us?
Let me ask you this about 1,000 years being added on to our timeline. And also I looked up, it was probably last year, I did a whole live stream on Giovanni Battista and his 1,080 etchings that he did in his lifetime. Now, these are etchings, okay? You have to etch it into this thing, and then it's got to go on to whatever plate that it's going on. And it's not like you just sit there and sketch, okay? These are etchings. Over 1,000 etchings, okay? All of his etchings depict the old world that was destroyed. They're absolutely beautiful etchings. His name translates to Giovanni Battista translates to John the Baptist. Isn't that interesting? If you ever have a chance, you need to look up his stuff because he's got amazing etchings. He went around to all different areas. A lot of it is in Rome, and he's etching. A lot of these buildings still are around too. The one pyramid with the castle in Rome, there's a castle that has a pyramid attached to it. Well, they've actually broke the wall down and put a road through there now. But the pyramid was at one part of the wall, and then the wall continued, and then it was the castle. So clearly this pyramid, which is the pyramid of Cestius, had some sort of functionality to that castle on this grid system. And when you look at when they go into the pyramid and follow this tunnel, the tunnel's all bricked out and it's all melted and muffed up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's pyramids and obelisks and all kinds of things all over the world that was part of this original civilization and the infrastructure of the Earth's grid system. And then you have things like the Balmoral Cairns at Balmoral Estate in Scotland, which is one of the royal residences. You know, I have my own ideas about what that's all about. You know, something that's clearly a pyramid is Prince Albert's Cairn.
Yes.
If you've seen that.
Yes, I've done stuff with Prince Albert's Memorial. You mean his pyramid in Scotland?
The pyramid in Scotland, yeah.
And
beautiful
listen, I have to tell you, Michelle, I did not even know until last night when I was going through your videos that you had even done anything on Scotland and its pyramids. Less than 2 weeks ago, I covered Scotland and their pyramids. And it's amazing to me that, you know, like I said, like, you know, I'm just coming upon your channel and your research, and it's like you're paralleling me, I'm paralleling you, and it's like I've never spoken to you before. I haven't really listened to much of your work. I've only recently started listening to you, and I'm like, wow, look, she was just talking about this. And we're, like I said, we're all converging. They can't stop it from happening.
Can't stop it.
The apocalypse is happening. Apocalypse means the revealing. Everything is being revealed, and it's being revealed through us. We are the apocalypse. We are meant to be here now at this time for this information to be brought forth because it's coming through us.
Right. And there's a passage in the Bible that you might know, you know, nothing secret will remain hid or something like that. Off the top of my head, I don't know.
Anything done in the dark will be brought to light.
Brought to light.
Yes.
You know, they can't. And again, the crimes are just so horrendous. And as far as they're concerned, they just want to keep going on forever. And, you know,
oh yeah, as long as we'll take it,
keep stealing, keep stealing, keep killing, you know, keep getting us to fight each other, keep taking our money, keep taking our energy. They're more than happy to keep doing that with ever being held responsible. And I can tell you,
they just want to take our breath now.
Right. They want to, you know, our connection.
Yes.
But they've been planning this for a couple of 100 years at least. And that's what a lot of my research is looking at. This is definitely planned, and they've had a lot of practice runs. You know, so when you hear about the Spanish flu in 1918 and the yellow fever in the 1800s in Memphis, you know, those were all the same old.
Yep, running the same script over and over.
And they've been using, you know, I think experimenting with viruses and releasing viruses to get us to this point and get us to think that, you know, this is a danger instead of realizing how strong our immune system is.
Exactly.
And, you know, what we're capable of overcoming.
Yeah, they don't want us to realize that, you know, we have immune systems. They work perfect. We're made in the image of the creator, and they want us to doubt ourselves, doubt our immune systems. We need them for everything. I'm sorry, continue.
No, I mean, just a lot of questionable stuff. I mean, I was looking specifically for information on how we got to this point today, and the I think it was Edward Jenner. Again, let me look that up real quick. It was an English physician that developed the first vaccination for smallpox, and he was a Freemason. And when you realize how involved the upper levels of Freemasonry are along with other secret societies, in implementing this.
Yeah.
Because the original Masons, who went up to 360 degrees, which is the, you know, degrees of a circle,
right?
They were the ones that built everything. So then you have this group of negative beings that infiltrated, again, the higher the higher ranks of not only secret societies but religions, they're all part of the same group with this agenda, a negative agenda against humanity. And they've been very, unfortunately, they've been very, very masterful in pulling this off. But because it's evil, because God wins, and light will triumph over dark, and I do believe that. Or absolutely. I can tell you right now, my car is built out as a little, I can camp in it. If I thought things were going to go south, I would drive out. I live in Arizona. I drive out to a place in the desert with shade and stay there. I will not be caught by this evil. But I don't think that's going to happen. That need is going to happen. And, it's been a slower process than I would have liked, but more and more is coming out. And again, they can't do this if we don't give our consent and if we know about it. And, they've tricked us all the way along. They've tricked us with our birth certificates. Yeah. They've tricked us with our names in capitals, capital letters, right? They've tricked us with everything. And so once we figure that out and not fight each other at the drop of a hat and not hate each other because of our skin color or our belief system, because they've been working on that specifically for a very, very long time. And people have to realize we're all in this together. And I do believe with all my heart, this whole situation has been manipulated, every bit of it, including the religion, organized. And when I say that, I mean organized religions. Yeah. I don't think Islam in its original form is what we've been taught that it is. I think it was something completely different. It had to do with connecting with our higher selves. Rumi is a Persian poet. And that's the Sufis were part of the inner dimension of Islam. And I think that was what it was originally, was this inner connection with the divine. So when you see Sufi dancers in Turkey where they're swirling,
they're spinning.
Why are the whirling dervishes swirling? Well, they're doing that because they're in a state of rapture, because they're connecting with,
and that's why
their higher selves.
Okay, so that explains something. And I Pet Goat, or is it I Pet Goat too? Everybody's always decoding I Pet Goat. I don't know if you know that, but anyway, at one part there is a Sufi dancer. It's actually a child. He's got the white garb on. It's flowing out as he's spinning, but he's also spinning up. He's floating up. Now, people think of a rapture. They think that they get floated up or sucked up or something like that. But that's exactly what's happening in I Pet Goat. The little kid's doing that spinning dance, and then he just kind of whirls right up. I just thought I'd throw that out there.
I mean, it's a practice. It's a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
And when we're kind of in our center, when we're connected with our Creator, when we're connected with all life, and we are connected with all life. Mm-hmm. At our essence, we're love.
Exactly.
And I absolutely believe that. And skin color had nothing to do with it. No. We're all here having a human experience, and Earth happens to be a very hard school right now.
Yeah, there's only one race, and it's the human race. And I keep telling everybody that. It's like the only difference is that people have different skin color because of different regions that they live in and stuff. Yeah, we speak different languages, but there's only one race. But they've divided us into there's 79 countries and all these different races and languages and borders and all this stuff, and it's just about division.
I saw the comment divide and conquer. Yeah, and that's pretty much what it's been all about. But I want to share my screen because there's a few things I want to talk about since the title was Motherboard Earth.
I'd like to point out real quick, Earth is green, and usually circuit boards and motherboards are green. Just wanted to point that out.
And if you look at the circuit board behind our pictures, again, the buildings on the Earth were laid out with intentionality.
Absolutely. Intentionality and functionality.
And they knew all about physics and laws of physics and how that works. And that actually ties back into the volcanoes you were talking about, because I'm absolutely convinced that these ancient builders, and when I say ancient, I mean on up until relatively recently, knew how to work with the elements. And I think volcanoes were very much a part of that. And magicians in their own way, but because they had mastery over, earth, fire, water, and air, and we can add ether to that because that was kind of taken out.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't know about it. They knew how to work with that. And we were at a much higher level of consciousness
Yeah.
before all this took place. And so, we weren't asking questions. Who are we? Where are we from? What shape is the earth? I mean, we were not asking those questions because we knew.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew how to work with all of that. So I'm just going to show you some things that I found in my research. And I'll go ahead and share my screen real quick.
Sure.
And hopefully I'll land where I want to go. I pulled up a bunch of things before we started.
Awesome.
Okay.
What do we got here? We're ready.
Can you see that?
Yep, there it's coming up now.
So I've done a couple of series on places that people recommended in comments. And I've thoroughly enjoyed doing that because I was able to uncover even more. And the Scottish pyramids were one of those places. Are you there?
I'm right here. Yes.
Okay. It went quiet. It's like, what?
Oh, sorry.
So I did a second series, and the first place I looked at was Shepherd's Bush, which is a district in West London. All kinds of interesting things popped out of it. It was clearly a nodal point. But the part that I want to mention got me on a whole nother line of research. What really started was really a breakthrough for me. So it started opening up other areas of understanding.
Right.
So I noticed when I was looking at Google Earth, on the left-hand side this is Heathrow Airport right here, and Shepherd's Bush is right here. White City, as part of Shepherd's Bush, was the location of Olympic Games and World Fair in the early 1900s, like around 1908.
Okay.
And there was a big stadium there. It's now BBC White City.
Can we zoom in on this just a little bit? If you're able to.
I'm not sure. Let's see. I really can't, because if I try to go back into my files to find it, it'd take a lot of time.
Oh, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's all good.
So this is London. So here's the airport. Here's Shepherd's Bush. The White City Stadium, which is now BBC White City, used to be a greyhound racing track before it went away. Okay, so my own research last summer took me to Sulphur Springs, which is a neighborhood in Tampa, Florida, which is up here.
Okay.
And there's a greyhound racing track at Sulphur Springs. I knew that. There's also a big water tower there, which is what got me there in the first place. So last summer, I had been studying this image on Google Earth because I was doing research on Sulphur Springs. So I knew that relationship existed. So when I saw that, I started looking at that.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Similar positions on the rivers. This is the Hillsborough River, and this is the River Thames. You've got the same river bends.
Yeah.
Okay. In a lot of these cases, the river's probably been intentionally diverted and drained, but, you kind of see this little weakly, and when I say weakly, I mean WEAKLY shape here, which is stronger over here, and then you have something that looks really similar here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going over Sulphur Springs in Tampa in this picture. The canal outside of town. I'm looking at these maps, and there used to be a See, this is a water tower in Sulphur Springs, and this is one near the Shepherd's Bush area, the Thames
Wow.
Water Tower.
Yeah.
This is okay, again, the Sulphur Springs Water Tower. Um, this was the dog track that used to exist here in Sulphur Springs. It used to have a trolley park. It was a trolley park location. It had trolley cars, and trolley parks were typically at the end of trolley lines, like Luna Park at Coney Island was a trolley park. Tampa had this trolley system, and then in the late 1930s, the trolleys were ended in Tampa. So, like by the end of World War II, and then they took out the tracks. Yeah, and this story is repeated everywhere.
Yeah, it's mirrored everywhere.
It's everywhere. So this is kind of early on in my what I'm about to share in terms of uncovering more about this. Okay, so I'm talking about Shepherd's Bush, right? Mm-hmm. In London. This is Busch Gardens, which is very close to Sulphur Springs.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had Adolphus Busch, who was a like multimillionaire brewer back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it was his company that started the Busch Gardens as beer gardens. It was started to market their beer. I'm skipping over some things here. So originally it was focused on the brewery, and then they added the theme park kinds of things.
And that's a theme that seems to be ongoing, is these amusement parks, these like they've turned them into like entertainment parks, instead they were meant for something else, but now they're just
I think originally they were part of the grid system.
Yeah.
So I think they were like a fun way to recharge the grids. Because these were everywhere.
Right.
And a lot of them burned down.
Yeah.
There's bunches in North America and the United States, turn of the century, 1800s, 1900s. There's maybe a list of 10 that are still, considered still existing. And there's like 4 pages of ones that are no longer. So they definitely had it out for these parks. So there's something going on with them.
Absolutely.
So then I tracked this relationship between this ellipse here that's the Greyhound track in Sulphur Springs. I found another ellipse that it goes right through, and it lands right here in the safari park in Busch Gardens. Okay. Wow. I think these ellipses, these tracks were part of the original system, like elliptical circuits of some kind.
I agree, because I've seen components on the grid system that have elliptical shapes to them.
Mm-hmm.
On circuitry.
Yeah. So they were like turned into racetracks. And I don't know what this is in Google Earth and where this lands, but there's something interesting going on there with the straight edges and angles. But the point that I wanted to make with this particular example is, what's this going on with Busch?
Yeah, we have a Busch Gardens here. It's an amusement park, Busch Gardens.
Yeah. So you got the Busch of Shepherd's Bush. You've got the Busch of Busch Gardens. I found another amusement park from a viewer in Belgium that is in a city with the name of Bosch, Bosch. I would really like to know what that means. Then you've got the Bush family. Right. Is there some kind of connection with this Bush thing going on?
Absolutely. I agree.
And then I ended with Las Vegas, because we don't think about how much electricity is needed to fuel that kind of wattage or light show.
Exactly.
Did that just happen? And that was in place a long time ago. So I think there's like electrical nodal points that are very high powered where you find things like this.
So do you think these high-powered nodal points would be the intersecting ley line areas? Because I find that where ley lines intersect, those nodal points seem to be very high energy spots. Are these things maybe located on those nodal points, you think? So you have the ley lines where the cathedrals are all lined up on. I feel like at the end of the day, we become main components on this grid system because we are the ones who seem to be, without us, the energy isn't driven anywhere. We're driving this energy, driving on the grid system, utilizing our energies going in and out of these buildings and stuff and all this stuff. I always wondered, why do we call them buildings? They're already built. They're not still building, are they? You know what I mean? Like, so, but at the end of the day, I feel like we are the most important components in this whole thing, and we don't even realize it,
Right. And I'm going to give some more examples, which is why I started there, especially of airports and racetracks. But it sure looks to me like the controllers immediately put these places to use as racetracks in the cases of the ellipse, because you've got a high amount of emotional energy going on. You've got betting, you've got drinking. I've seen race cars, I've seen thoroughbred racing, and they're just taking advantage of this energy that's being produced
right
under those circumstances. And then in the cathedrals and churches and whatnot, you've got all this human energy, praying.
Yes.
And that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that's not, but again, this system has been set up to harvest human energy. And these cathedrals and the rose windows and the steeples and the different shapes of the windows were all serving a function on the original grid system.
So the original grid system was to enhance
life,
energy, and now it's to harvest it.
I believe that.
Inversion again. We have another inversion there. Yeah.
And again, we're waking up.
Yeah.
We're waking up in droves. And so, up until the last 5-10 years, because I think the awakening has been exponential in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, there's a quickening happening. Yes.
Yeah. So, that's what, and people are going to these places out of the goodness of their heart, especially when you're talking about going to church on Sunday. You're going to worship the Almighty. If that's your, if that's your bent. It's unfortunately they've used our best qualities against us.
Yeah.
And they've done that in a lot of different areas.
Absolutely.
I always want to be loving and giving, and I've had to learn I can't be that way all the time.
Yeah.
as much as I want to, I can't.
They've confined us to the days of the week, the months of the year, the 24 hours in a day, and all this stuff. And I feel like we've been taken off of natural time. For instance, eating, they have you eating 3 square meals a day. This is a food pyramid, all this stuff, where I think you would normally, and this is how I function now, is I eat when I'm hungry, and your body takes about 12 hours to process out that one meal. And then you would you would eat 12 hours later. Of course, whatever you eat in that 12 hours, that first meal that you have has to be nutritious and sustain you till 12 hours later. But they have everybody on this food pyramid scheme.
And then you have the health related issues of eating the wrong foods, which is being promoted. They're making a ton of money on that. All the processed foods and everything, all the fried foods. And then you have the health issues and high blood pressure and obesity, epidemic proportions. And then you need to get medication in order to do that. And they've suppressed the natural and non-intrusive healing, like frequencies.
Yeah. Now everything's invasive. It's not intrusive before, now it's all invasive. It's all, even with cancer, first of all, shouldn't even exist at all. It only sprung up during the industrial age when we started processing all our foods and took all the nutrition out of it. Basically, cancer thrives with lack of nutrition, and basically that's what people are filling their bodies with, is lack of nutrition. It's just empty junk that does nothing for your system except for toxify it, and then your body has to figure out how to get rid of it.
And knowing about it doesn't keep me from loving potato chips and fried foods, and I'm trying to get better.
It's good, but of course,
hamburgers, French fries.
It'd be really hard for me to give up bacon and chicken.
Yep.
But the thing is that they put these addictive additives in it. People think that they ate something 2 hours ago, now they're hungry again. Well, that's because of the MSG and all this excitotoxins, and it wasn't nutritious anyway, so your body's craving something else, but you're going to fill it with more toxins and stuff. And these are the type of people that own all the fast food restaurants and everything, and the massive companies that produce our foods, and even the water supply. I mean, they've totally tainted that as well.
Yeah, they've been working on this really hard for a while. So I'm going to go back to the airport racetrack phenomena here real quick, because this led to some major insights. And, without my YouTube community making a lot of different suggestions, I don't really have a lot of time to go look. And so it really helped me accelerate this piece. So my title is Interesting Comments I've Received Redux, meaning it's the second time I've done a series like this. And I called it Electricity Circuits and Springs. And this is really where I started to develop more of that whole concept, that this circuit board Earth, the truth of it is hidden in our language. And I'll go into that in just a moment. But I showed you the example of London and Tampa just a moment ago, and somebody said, hey, look at Montreal. And sure enough, there's the airport, and there's I think it's a former thoroughbred racing track here. Philadelphia.
Yeah.
I found an ellipse here, and then all of the sports stadiums are here. So all the sports stadiums in these big cities are all around the same place. Yes. They're all somehow connected to this. Found the same thing in Toronto and Los Angeles. Either there's a track there or there used to be a track there. Sydney, Australia, found a thoroughbred racetrack here, the Royal Randwick Racecourse. Same kind of angle, maybe not identical, but it's not far away.
And I have to say, this goes for smaller airports too, guys. It's not just larger airports. When I lived in Florida, down in the Bonita Springs area there was a Greyhound racetrack, and there was a small airport nearby. It was for Cessnas, but still, it's an airport.
And I'm pointing out the relationship. I mean, I don't know enough about this to give you the details about how that works together. But to me, it puts airports in the list of, most likely pre-existing infrastructure. And, I know a lot of people have been looking at airships, to a certain extent, myself included, and that this original civilization was doing air travel, at least via Zeppelins. Who knows? That information's been obscured as far as other types of aircrafts, but at the very least, airships, Zeppelins, that kind of thing have been looked at by other researchers, and it certainly looks like there's a lot more going on than we've been told. Somebody said, look at Copenhagen. So I did, and I found all kinds of things near the airport. And there's a whole bunch of starports in this area here, as well as a couple of amusement parks. The Bakken Amusement Park is up here, and the Tivoli Gardens is.
Let me stop you for a second. I don't mean to interrupt you, but you're not screen sharing right now.
I'm not.
No, okay. You have
sorry
to go back
that.
to screen share.
Sorry, I thought I was.
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay. I'll get us back up to the speed.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, so here. So this is around Copenhagen in Denmark. So you have the airport here. You've got a couple of racetracks up this way. You have several star forts in this area. You have more racetracks over here. And let me go back a little bit because I was talking about this before I went to Copenhagen, where I started seeing this same relationship, like Montreal and Philadelphia, Toronto, Los Angeles, Sydney, in some kind of angular relationship, and they're not that far away. I mean, if you look up a distance finder, it's going to be within a few miles of each other. So that's what I was talking about when I thought the screen was being shared. And again, it's a geometric kind of configuration. So they're in alignment with each other. There's 3-star forts right here.
Wow.
And then there's other star forts in the water here.
Wow, that's amazing.
And that was when I found, I mean, I wouldn't have been looking here had somebody not suggested it with the airport. Okay. So when I do my research, I tend to go where I'm guided. So it seems like I'm going off track a lot of times, but it really feels important.
It leads right back around to where you need to be anyway. And I'm very grateful for subscribers suggesting these types of things to us, because a lot of times I wouldn't even have found stuff unless somebody had mentioned it to me. So that's great.
Now, a couple of things to mention about Denmark, and the same applies to Norway and to the Channel Islands as well. During World War II, the Nazi Germans occupied these places for almost the whole time. So like 1940 to 1945 was pretty typical. So there was something about these places, Denmark, Norway, and the Channel Islands, that they were very, very interested in. So when you look at the Danish SS unit headquarters in Copenhagen, it was the Danish Freemasonic Lodge. And you have a name of a person that designed it. And this is what it looked like. And you get the comparison of the size of the people compared to the size of the building. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I just
okay.
muted for 1 second.
Yep. When you mute it, it goes dead silent. Okay. So anyway, I just want to share that, the proportions of this building with the people next to it.
Yeah, that makes no sense whatsoever.
And again, you have these racetracks near Star Fort. So this is a Star Fort. There's Charlottenlund Fort. And not only that, you have the shape of the racetrack. If you can see, it's almost like an egg shape.
Yes.
It's very similar to this egg shape right here.
Oh, yeah.
They're very close to each other. So I wanted to point that out. And these are major, major thoroughbred races that are taking place on these racetracks.
Right. So it's extremely high energy area right there, where you got the people, you got the horses running on the track, all the excitement taking place, all the gathering of that energy collecting into that one spot. And then they have it looping around, it seems like. And then, of course, the water involved. Water plays a huge part in this grid system with the flow of energy.
Mm-hmm. It really does. And then you've got the railroad going through here. So you see these things and you find the railroad right next to it. And you've got Tivoli Gardens, which is says to be the third oldest amusement park in Europe, I want to say. And then you've got this Star Fort called Castellet right here in the kind of the inner area of Copenhagen. You've got the Star City fortifications here.
Right.
I'm only using the word fortification as a word of convenience.
Right. Clearly they weren't fortifications. That's his story. They were, but water is always incorporated with these star forts, and it's a key component to them.
And then I put, for comparison, this is the Castellet in Copenhagen that I just showed you here. And it looks like the Castle of Good Hope in Cape Town and Fort McHenry in Baltimore, Maryland. You know,
Wow.
that's the same shape. Now you've got different shapes of star forts, but these three are the same style. And this is the one in Cape Town, which is over 6,000 miles away. And then Fort McHenry is over 4,000 miles away in a different direction.
So the shape of the star fort dictates the type of energy frequency that it's giving off or collecting.
That would make sense. And again, there's things I can only guess at. I've also wondered if the star forts themselves have something to do with stars, actual
Right.
stars. And in a lot of cases, there's a lighthouse that's associated with the star fort. So
Yeah,
I think there's
that's
something going on with that too.
very interesting that you've been talking about lighthouses. I've over the last year, I keep telling people that I really want to get into lighthouses. I know lighthouses are not what they're telling us, and that I really wanted to dive into that. And I noticed that you already went headfirst into lighthouses, and I think that's great. Your information is right on point.
And I've been following alignments and so forth for 3 years now, as we talked about. I started blogging and making videos in earnest in 2018, in June of 2018. So it's just been a little over 3 years, and all of my videos are based on my blog posts. So everything that I talk about, I've written out first, and then I just turn this into a script and put the pictures with it, and that's how I make my videos.
Yeah, you do
Um,
amazing work.
and it's the best way for me to do this. I don't see myself as a speaker first. I see myself as a writer. And I've really gotten into the speaking more because I felt like that came along with the territory when I got the information.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like, oops,
No, I think
I've got to do something with this.
you have a really good voice for this. You're very clear and decisive and very easy to understand. And I really appreciate that. I'm glad that you're doing this.
You're welcome. Sometimes there's a lot of takes on the recording.
Yeah, I hear you. I know what you mean.
So anyway, this is, led me down an interesting path. I already knew about the star forts on the Alderney Island, and this is one of the Channel Islands that I was talking about just a moment ago that the Germans were on during the war. So there's got to be something very special on the grid with these places. And then there's the Tivoli Gardens that I mentioned, and then that's very, very close to the Central Rail Station in downtown Copenhagen. So you have the amusement park here, and you've got the rail station here and the rail yards here. So I'm just really sure there's a connection between these amusement parks and railroads.
Yeah,
You know,
and that picture that you had up earlier of Las Vegas, that I believe is from the article that says Las Vegas looks like a circuit board from 10,800 feet. I mean, they even admit it right there, and I like to do that. I like to look at cities at night, all lit up, like satellite views of them, because you can really get a good feel of the layout of the grid system when it's all lit up like that. I think
true story.
I think Las Vegas, places like that, are using the free energy grid system. They're just making people pay for it.
True. I'm just scrolling down through here just to see what I want to bring out. Like I said, as I've been doing my research, the story of how things were taken over, based on the history that we were told. So there's a story about how the Kingdom of Norway and Denmark was actually pulled into the Napoleonic Wars as a deception. And so they ended up on the side of Napoleon, and Napoleon lost. So Great Britain and let me see. Yeah. So anyway, the winning countries split it up.
Uh-huh.
And that's just, an example of how all this has taken place. Because the British were said to have, stolen the fleet of the Norwegian Denmark, the Danes and the Norwegians who were together. So they stole the fleet, literally, Um, they seized the naval fleet, and what else is Denmark, Norway going to do but get in the war, on the other side? So, this deception that's been going on, and provocation, lots of provocation to get people into these wars to begin with, and then they're stuck, and then they take everything away from them, and that's been going on in case after case.
Yeah.
That's what happened to the Ottoman Empire at the end of World War One. They ended up on the losing side, and the whole empire got carved up.
Right.
So they've been dismantling the original civilization piece by piece.
And in the process of doing that, causing all this strife and negative energy through the course of them dismantling everything, disrupting people's lives, killing people off in certain areas, and redesignating them and stuff. So wars aren't just to divvy up stuff and destroy stuff. It's also creating that, again, more negative energy that reverberates throughout these generations in these areas.
Right. And that only benefits them because that's what they feed on. Doesn't benefit us. So Toledo, somebody suggested I look at Toledo. I found the airport. I found the racetracks. I found the history of trolley parks connected with these places. Again, more often than not, they were closed down for a variety of reasons. No longer there anymore. These trolley parks were the terminals of the streetcar lines, like I mentioned before, which is why I really think they were part of a fun way to recharge the system.
Right, right.
And then the next piece of this, which is kind of a natural transition, which is what my Circuit Board Earth video is based on, is that they're telling us in our very language what they really are.
Like a terminal.
But they don't tell us that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's the end of a railroad or other transport route, and it's a point of connection for closing an electric circuit. And so what I did with that piece that you put on your channel is I started pulling out all of these electrical terminology connections that I had made to show that that's what they're doing.
How about this? How about circuit court?
It's all, I think it's all part of it.
Yeah, well, they charge you with stuff. They charge you and discharge you. You have, the terminals. So we're going off screen share here, just so you know, in case you want to screen share again. But I've been noticing that a lot of the language that we use, it's right there in it. Even the store Circuit City, right. All this stuff.
So it's like they're, help me think this out if you don't mind. It's like they are turning us into this grid. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does, because I feel like without us, their grid is basically useless. They need us for the grid system to work. And some people say they turned us into a type of a battery, because of our energies. They can make us a weak battery or a strong battery. But yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And that we are key components to this grid system. The grid system they have functioning now is not for our benefit. They're harvesting our energy to keep their grid system going. And we all feel it every day when we go out into it. It's just like, it just sucks your energy out, especially now with some of the stuff that's going on. Right.
And when it's functioning the way that it's supposed to, we are all part of the grid.
Yeah.
Our energetics and electromagnetics match that.
Yes.
We're the same. So they're not us. They're from outside of that system. So they had to create something that worked for them.
Again,
and for those.
Again, I hate to interrupt you. We always say they can't create. They can only take what's created and invert it. And this is what they've done. They've taken the natural grid system that was here from the previous civilization and inverted it, because they can't create anything. They can only go around and destroy stuff.
Right. Which they're very good at.
Yeah.
But I was just going to say that I've only seen the movie The Matrix once, and it was through a friend of mine that I probably would not have seen it at all otherwise. But it's like, think of the movie The Matrix as a documentary,
Yeah.
and it's not far from wrong. And you think at the beginning of the people in the pods with the plugs in their
Uh-huh.
head,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, they're harvesting our energy. And when you think about the way the system is set up, instead of having time to put into personal development and spiritual development, we're all too busy making a living so we can survive.
Exactly.
And that's, taxing us, taxing our energy,
Yes.
using our energy. Um, it's all been a setup. And, just for an example, I'm really interested in Tibet and Tibetan Buddhism. And uh, at one time in Tibet, the whole community would support anybody that wanted to develop their higher abilities. So we would know them as a yogi, the
Mhm.
guys that can levitate, you know, run really, 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 really fast. There's a practice like that. There's a practice of bilocation, of being able to be in two places at the same time.
Yeah.
There's all of these higher abilities that are called siddhis, which are spelled Siddhis,
Interesting.
um, higher human superpowers. And so the way that their culture was set up is that anybody that wanted to do that, and typically they were monks or nuns, they would support them, food or whatever. And typically they didn't need very much for it because they tended to be ascetics.
Yes, as
But
a matter of fact, I don't mean to interrupt you again, but I do remember hearing about a yogi a long time ago who actually like studied since childhood, hadn't eaten for like quite a long time, like sustained through just the ether energy, I guess, but had not eaten any food for like 70 years or something.
yeah,
I know that sounds insane. We can't even fathom that, but actually, our bodies can self sustain through this etheric energy. We are taught that we have to, have these certain foods and all this stuff in that, but there was a different way of being prior to
right,
this, to what we live
exactly.
in now. Yeah.
Exactly. So anybody that really wanted to attain these higher abilities, I mean, they could push their hands into stone. They could be in
Oh,
a cave, and they could keep themselves warm by,
that
generating.
reminds
And
me of a picture I saw where it looks like it's a flat stone and there's kind of like a handprint in it, almost as if, like, say, if somebody took their hand and went through silly putty with it, like it was melted, kind of. And when you just said that they could put their hand, like, through a rock or whatever, that picture just popped into my head because it looked like somebody was like, oh, look at this big lump of, Play-Doh. Let me just stick my hand in it. But it was kind of like pushed in and slid down a little, but you can clearly see it's a hand. That's
yeah,
crazy.
and you have handprints and footprints like that all in these monasteries in the Himalayas.
Wow.
Um, so what happened? So I think they were like one of the last surviving functioning remnants, and then the Chinese communists invaded Tibet in 1950, and the Tibetan people were genocided, and you have the government in exile in India.
Mm-hmm.
But these people, very high consciousness, were deliberately lowered down and tortured. So
Yes.
lowered in their consciousness and tortured. Terrible things going on, and that's just one example. Again, this has been going on in many different places, a lot of unknown places, and that's what they're trying to keep us down.
Yeah.
you know
And they have to
because,
work hard at it 24/7 because if for even a second they lift off of trying to keep us down, and we're like a ball that you would hold underwater. As soon as you let off of it a little, that ball's going to spring back up. This is why they work 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year on every level, from what's going on with the chemtrails in the sky to where we live, all this information being kept from us, all this toxicity being fed into us, the stresses that we have to live in our daily lives, is all to keep us from rising, because the natural order of things is for our consciousness to rise up.
of course, and for us to evolve positively.
Right.
I mean, I think every, and I'm only going to use the word normal person, just Because every normal person in every country in the world wants to have a good life, have a good, take care of their family, have enough to eat, food on the table, roof over their head,
Yeah.
our pets, um, you know, love and care for each other, and then there's just multitude of external events going on that affect that, whether it's war, whether it's family crises, involving drugs or suicide or, murder, whatever's going on, that's, we don't want that.
Right. And
you
I've
know,
heard people say so many times the whole system's set up for us to fail. Before the reset, it was set up for us to thrive. And now everybody has that feeling, well, it's set up for us to fail. And in many ways, all across the board, it is. I mean, there's always some sort of a pitfall or roadblock in our way in life that veers us off of our courses. Coming upon this information and waking up when I did through the course of my life, looking back retrospectively, I'm on my purpose now, and a lot of people are deviated from finding their purpose in life, and this is where depression comes in. All this self-medicating just to get through their day and you just said before the show how you really feel like this is your purpose, this is what you're here to do, and to get this message out, to learn this stuff, and then to learn it and bring people in and teach them as you're learning it, which that's a process in itself to even figure out how to do that. I had to figure out how to learn it, articulate it, take it all in and digest it, and then bring it back out into a live stream where everybody could understand it, which kudos to you because you do a great job on it. But
well, I guess I kind of happened on it naturally because I've really lived a very different life. I joined the Army in '82, and I was in the service for almost 4 years and got out and went to school. That's why I got out a little bit early. So I started kind of breaking away from what was expected of me, especially when I joined the Army. Not going to college, but when I joined the Army, my parents were like horrified. And I just started studying my own course, and I've lived in a lot of different places. I married a retired Army sergeant. He passed away in 2001 from complications from Agent Orange, which I didn't know until a couple of years ago. But I married somebody almost 20 years older than myself. I've moved around a lot. I've lived in a lot of different places. I don't watch television and haven't been interested in a long time. And I guess I kind of wanted to fill my head with the things that I was interested in, which is what we've already been talking about. This alternative history, history's mysteries, and then starting to do my own research has taken me in a whole different direction. And doing things I never expected to do. Because I'm much more comfortable writing. But even then, I didn't have anything to write about until this came up, and I really started to get it and started to put it together.
Yeah.
So I would write maybe like one poem a year, or just drip, drip, drip. I knew I had the abilities because I was a good technical writer.
Right. You hadn't found that outlet for the passion.
I just didn't have the outlet for it.
Yeah.
Now, I can write till the cows come home, but I have no interest in writing about my everyday life to tell you about. I don't want to. That's not what this is about. This is like, okay, you got this information. You need to get it out to the best of your ability in a way that people will really understand it, because it's so different from what we've been taught that if I did it any other way, you tune me out and say, oh, she's crazy.
Well, the thing I find interesting, they tell us that there was an advanced civilization. Like if you watch Ancient Aliens, I used to be into that back in the day. Well, it's an ancient advanced civilization that must have. The thing is that yes, there was an advanced civilization, but they're not ancient. Right. This is very recent.
And the way that I look at it is it was built by humans, but there was a relationship with extraterrestrial good, positive. Now, negative ones have been involved in this, but we had a relationship let's say with ancient aliens.
Right.
It wasn't, it wasn't ancient aliens came to
Like,
Earth and built all of this stuff,
no,
but there
like,
was this working relationship. And then when this hostile takeover happened, we've been quarantined because of how bad it is. This evil has been using Earth as a base and humanity as a base to do all their evil shit, all over the all over the universe. I mean,
right.
it's been it's a huge problem. And so what happens here, and this is another reason it's like, okay, I really don't think they're going to get away with this. What happens here is so important, is because it affects the future of the universe.
Right.
And if they're not held accountable, if they're not stopped, then, I can't even imagine that, because you have more of what we've been talking about, more of the same, more of the predation and the parasitism and,
Right.
anti-life agenda,
Right.
and not, abundance and beauty and growth and creation, which is what we're supposed to be doing.
Right.
And experiencing. And, to me, it's not even fathomable that they're going to get away with what they've done. And they can only get away with it if it remains hidden.
Exactly. And that's what I was saying. The apocalypse is happening now. It is happening through us. We are the ones who are bringing this information forth, and many others probably out there that I have never even encountered yet, all across the plane. I like to say the plane of existence that we're on. We're all converging. We're all bringing this out, and it is so important right now for it to come out. It has to come out. It cannot stay hidden. And like they say, there's only three things that cannot stay hidden: is the sun and the moon and the truth. And I'm just super excited to even be a part of this. It's been quite a journey up till this point, and I've learned so much. And just when I think I got things figured out, just something else falls into my lap, yes. And I have to reconfigure everything and rethink everything. And I like that, though. That's a good thing, I think.
There's always more. And when you start seeing things differently, there's so much to find.
Yes.
And not just in the environment around you, but, in terms of interpreting information. I was telling you before we started, I'm doing a series called Seeing World History with New Eyes since 1945. Mm-hmm. And I did 1945 to 1960. It's like half hour long, 1961 to 1980, maybe a little bit longer. And I did 81 to 89, and I was graduated from high school in 81. And I just want to share that what started happening that year was like all hell broke loose with terrorist attacks and bombings and assassination attempts and AIDS and airplanes being blown out of the sky. It's like we've been under this intense psychological warfare since, really, as a whole, all over the earth since 1980, 81.
Yeah, it really ramped up.
Because before that, it was more localized in other parts of the world. In the early 80s, it exploded. And, that's what we've been living under. And that's another reason it's been so hard to wake up, is we've been traumatized. We've been terrorized by these acts of violence. Innocent people. Just absolutely affected by that. It's still happening to a certain extent, but it's not. I just got out of 1990 and the research I'm doing, and the video part that's already 40 minutes long, so it's going to be a long one. But there was a lot going on in 90.
Yeah.
And before I go off on that tangent, because I want to go back to that and rope in a couple of things we were talking about, I just want to show something about cathedrals, because it's important. To understanding why I think they were healing frequency resonators, and they were about harmony and balance of the collective. So people going into them, but also the system as a whole.
Right.
I want to go there real quick, and then I'll jump over to some things I wanted to share from 1990.
Okay. Whenever you're ready to screen share.
Okay. Can you see me?
Yeah.
All right, good. Okay, so I'm just going to go down a little bit, because I was already starting to make that connection in my head that there was something about cathedrals. Even the name cathedral is like, it has cathode in it. And cathode goes back to electrical circuitry. So I'm kicking around doing my research. Let me, this is Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, similarities. Let's see. Saratoga Springs, racetrack, trolley, health resort. Okay, let me find it. I'm sorry, guys. Start looking into it in your community. It's history of trolleys and trolley parks and that kind of thing. Okay.
I just got a little more coffee.
Okay. Cool. Okay. So that was what I was looking for. For example, this is one of the examples. So this is a atomic waveform here.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see basically the same shape in this type of cathedral window.
Yes.
And again, when you start really becoming tuned into this and you start looking at any building, you're going to start seeing these shapes come out.
Yeah, those are everywhere.
I'm just going to go down because okay. Okay. I probably should have had this pulled up before.
That's okay. Don't worry about
There's
it.
some interesting, I mean, when you really start looking into stuff, there's really some interesting stuff to find. Beautiful building. So that all serves a functional purpose. Every window on there.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. The architecture, I call it high tech. Sure means bright.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you've got the geometries of these buildings. So these are cathedral architecture, and it equates to frequency with how it's laid out. And then when I was looking up information on ellipses, I stumbled across this diagram showing the efficiency of the axial ratio of 2 antenna here, and it brought to mind this cathedral window shape that I see all the time.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
it makes sense.
This is amazing. When I saw you present this, I was like, oh my gosh. And they also see this type of architecture inside the cathedral as well, with the pillars inside that come up and arch over on the interior, even in the windows as well.
And I just want to point out, this is not in churches. I'm seeing this in railroad stations. I'm seeing it in old court buildings, a lot of which have been torn down. They have the same types of windows.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were destroyed during wartime.
Yes, this picture right here, I actually screenshotted this picture and shared it around because we're always trying to figure out why these doors entering these cathedrals and stuff have this sort of a layered effect to it. And when you showed this picture with the octaves, I was like, oh, like it makes sense, of course.
And for those that are interested, I would look up Walter Russell. He's kind of an overlooked genius that this is one of his diagrams on the left. And then he's talked a lot about other things, and he's not forgotten, but he's minimized his work, like Tesla and some other people that were alternative thinkers back in the day. And Russell's work holds a lot of clues to the nature of reality. And I believe his name is spelled either with one L or two, the Russell part. So Walter Russell. So if you look up, you'll see a lot of different diagrams that he put together.
Now our ether, the space around us is filled with wavelengths that are very harmful to us. That we're like surrounded in this soup of Wi-Fi and all these other frequencies that are very harmful to the environment and to us. Whereas before, everything was harmonious. There was most likely, in my mind's eye, I feel like there was a symphony flowing through the air. It was like a constant symphony that you could actually audibly hear and then also feel it as well through your body. There was nothing harmful.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think it was absolutely beautiful.
Absolutely.
I think it was amazing. I think I shared somewhere else that I would like to time travel for a day and just go back and see this,
Right.
and see what it was like. So I had already had an inkling that there was a direct connection between cathedral rose windows on the right and musical notes. That had already come up in my research. I know Baltimore Fats had looked into that, but it made sense. So that there's a correlation between these shapes here, the cymatic shape and the shape of the cathedral window. And then when you really start drilling down into it and you can start matching a solfeggio cymatic shape with an actual window.
Yep.
So I found that one by counting the number of petals here. And I replicated it. And then you see the organ pipes all around the window.
Right.
So it's not that hard to surmise that organ is playing music that's going to go through that window out into the grid system and connect with other frequencies that are being played by different organs in different buildings with different windows.
Maybe this was their type of Wi-Fi.
It makes total. I mean, that makes sense to me.
And it's so simple and it's so easy. It's not complicated. It doesn't have all these intricate, like the way we have things set up now, it's so overcomplicated that the common person could never understand it unless they specialized within, making computer boards or whatever like that. But when you look at the old world and the way they had it set up, it's in its simplest form. Like look at Nikola Tesla with his Tesla coil, which is probably just old world technology, and he back and engineered that, of course. But you just need some copper and a few other things, and you put it in the right configuration, and you got free energy.
Mm-hmm. So we had it. We're not getting there. We used to have it.
Yeah, the future is in the past. That's what that movie Back to the Future, because that was the future. It's not, it's gone.
Right. And that's a great example of predictive programming where the controllers worked into it things like 9/11 and other things like that, they're required to tell us what they're doing, but they don't tell us they're telling us, things like that.
Right. And they're keeping that you don't have the eyes to see it.
So these solfeggio tones were healing, and they balanced energy and body, mind, and spirit. And they had certain frequencies had certain healing effects throughout the body.
Mm-hmm.
And I showed that example again. And then they changed it. They changed it from like 432 to 440 back in the 30s. And I'm going to stop sharing here.
I also want to point out one thing about frequencies. The modern music that we have today with these heavy bass beats, that's been done by design. It's very destructive, and it also promotes fornication, which gets us at that baser level of thought. Of course, procreation is a sacred thing. You're creating life and stuff, or fornication is just for pleasure, or so yeah, I've noticed that when I was looking at how they changed the frequency of music and introduced these heavy bass beats and what it does to the human vibration and where it takes your mindset to.
Yeah, I mean, they really have kept us stuck in the lower chakras as much as possible.
Yeah,
and then kept us gaslighted and confused, and because they want us messed up.
They
really
want us
do.
messed up. They want the whole family unit destroyed and messed up. And like I said, these types of things reverberate through generations. You get this cycle started, and it's hard to break that cycle. A lot of people just continue the cycle on and on through the next generation. And this is what they want. Basically, sometimes they just sit back and just watch it all happen because they've already lined it all up for things to end up this way. You know what I mean?
But keep in mind, they're losing control of the narrative, and we can write the next chapter of our story. So what has taken place needs, people that are ready for it need to be aware of it. To the extent that you're able to bear it, we need to heal it. Some people may never wake up.
Yeah.
But we, like I said, I just don't believe they're going to get away with it, and we're going to see some amazing things. Probably not to the too far distant future.
I agree 100%. I don't mean to interrupt you again, but I was thinking about this, the reset dates, as far as the timeline goes and everything. And maybe it's a cyclical nature. Maybe it's a 200-year cycle that might happen for his resets. Now, if they caused the reset, or did they know it was coming and they piggybacked it, to come out on top?
I do think they caused it. I really think that this civilization was in place for a very long time.
Yeah, I think
so how a cyclical, cataclysmic cycle could work, I'm not really sure, because what I am seeing would not be in existence if that was going on.
Okay, so there's a lady who, and I can't think of her name right now, but she does a thing about the 1,000-year reign of Christ, which would be the golden age, which would be prior to the reset, which is this glorious civilization that we are seeing. She's equating that to the 1,000-year reign of Christ, and that once that 1,000-year reign was over, and those inhabitants of the old world went, say, to heaven or wherever they went, Lucifer was released for a short season, and that is what we're in now, this short season that's almost over. We're kind of like at the end of Satan's short season, and now something else big is about to happen on the horizon.
Yeah, I may not have nailed down the mechanism to that level, but Satan's definitely here.
Yeah.
What we're seeing is definitely satanic and demonic. And it's not just an angel sitting on one shoulder and a devil sitting on another shoulder to, war in our head. No, it's much darker than that.
Yes.
And so, for whatever reason, this is being allowed to play out this way. I tend to believe we're going into a new cycle, and we have to deal with the dregs of the old cycle. Excuse me. Excuse me. So we have to deal with the dregs and detritus of the cycle we've been in, so that it doesn't happen again. Is what I'm thinking. Is we're entering a whole new way of being, and if we don't deal on some level with what's taking place here, it can just happen all over again.
Exactly. Now that you mentioned that, I was just listening to your video early. Video you mirrored on your channel called A Tall Tale.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and in there he talks about.
Actually, I didn't actually mirror it. I was involved in co-creating it.
I'm so sorry, but I definitely want to mirror that. I want to mirror that on my channel, so I'm asking permission now. And that's amazing. The whole thing, the video, and I'm going to share it here in the chat and everything. Amazing information, and I just kind of lost my train of thought where I was going with that. Oh my goodness, I totally lost it. But he says some really interesting stuff in there. And I'm sure it'll come back to me in a second, but you can continue.
Well, that was actually sent to me by a viewer back in January, and he had written it down, and I read through it at the time. I thought, well, that makes sense. And then I kind of filed it away, and then I read it again. I think, wait a minute. That really makes sense.
So, what he said was about, 100 years ago with the Spanish flu and all this stuff that we're seeing now, that they did the same thing to the people 100 years ago. And that, most people don't even know this information. Of course, the Televised Your Vision isn't talking about it, but if you don't know your past, you're doomed to repeat it. And this is exactly what's happening right now. If we don't get this figured out and bring out this information and show how they've been lying to us, and remind people and re-wake them back up and stuff or just wake them up, that this could all just happen all over again,
And I saw a picture, I want to say it's within the last couple of days, that was marked, Spanish flu 1918 with somebody wearing a mask.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember exactly what the caption was, but they're laughing at us.
Oh yeah.
They're laughing at us.
They're having a good laugh on us.
It's about control.
Absolutely.
And
and not just control, but it's the easiest. I mean, all they have to do is just mind manipulate us, and everybody just goes and gives them the control. They just give it to them.
Yeah. And we've been conditioned to do that, though.
Yeah.
I mean, this has been a very deliberate process, and it's I mentioned the 80s when all hell broke loose, but it's been going on for quite some time, and it's again, it's very deliberate, and thankfully it's not possible to mind control the whole human race, which is what they wanted.
Yeah.
But that wasn't possible. And then we were able to connect with each other via the internet and these wonderful venues, and if it doesn't get out one way, if they try to suppress it one way, it's going to come out another way. So you can mirror all you want on your channel. In my stuff.
I'm putting it in the chat right now, the link to this video. It was really good. I really enjoyed his voice, his commentary, the way he put it all. And I was hoping it never ended. I just want to keep listening to him talk about it. Yep. But it does really make you think. And then, there's a lot of stuff that I didn't even realize that was going on with these different flus in the past, the vaccine programs that they had out back then, the things that they did to the military only in other countries, only to send them home and say, oh, they got this from over there. Well, and then here we are now. It's just all happening all over again, it's them playing their card over and over again. And if we don't pay attention and we don't do our due diligence, they don't care if they get over on us. It's your fault that you didn't see what you were supposed to see. They left all the little breadcrumbs, but they also left all the distraction there for you to veer away from all their little breadcrumbs. But they can't say they didn't put them out there, Right. But it's I feel like I'm on my purpose doing this and getting this information out. I'm very passionate about it, as you are too, and most of us are. It's so important, and we don't want to go through this again. We don't want to live this way. I certainly don't want to do a repeat of this whole thing next year and everything. And they're going to keep trying it. They're going to keep doing it as long as they can get most of the population of the world to go along and play along with their game. I mean, literally, if we just stop and we ignore all this stuff and we turn our backs to it, it will literally just melt away. It'll go away.
Focusing on it will drive you crazy.
Yes.
What's going on right now. And so it's been very easy for me just to focus on my research because I can't stand looking at anything else. Let me show you something real quick. I know we've been at it over 2 hours, but there is something I want to share before we end.
Sure.
And that is some stuff that I pulled up in doing research about the year 1990.
Okay. Right.
And I just finished doing the research for 1990.
Yeah.
So this has ended up being longer than what I've done so far, but what I'm finding is just so interesting, but I'm also looking at it with more insight than the ones I've done before like this. And I'm looking at different periods of time since 1945. Mm-hmm. So just in 1990, and I'm really, really curious about this. These are things that I found. First of all, the EUnet showed up on January 1st of 1990, selling internet access to commercial internets, along with an American company called Cynet. And Cynet was connected to DARPA in Northern Virginia, if anybody knows anything about DARPA. And all of this is connected to DARPA.
Yeah, that sounds like Skynet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's all in there. Okay. Right. So I saw CERN when I was looking at the information about EUNet because it was instrumental in connecting FranceNet with CERN's TCP/IP connections. So this is about 10 years into the internet age when all this is happening because it started in the early 80s. Okay. January 1st. On February 2nd, Mandela was released from prison in South Africa. And by the end of the year, Tim Berners-Lee, who worked at CERN, so there was another CERN connection, built all the tools necessary for a working World Wide Web. So that means that the World Wide Web came out of CERN. And then I was really curious about Mandela because we know about the Mandela effect, right? The idea that some people that remember that he died in prison in the 80s.
Yes, yes.
You know, and then all of a sudden he's president of South Africa and all this stuff is going on.
Yes.
But the fact that it showed up in the middle of these two events really got my attention because it's like, okay, you know, what's going on here? And, you know, I don't have an answer. I'm just asking the question because it's there.
Yeah, it's there.
It's like, is there a connection between CERN and the Mandela effect is my question.
I think CERN is, to a certain extent, a giant magic circle.
It's more than finding the God particle.
Yeah, they're definitely not doing that. Yeah, well, I don't know what they're doing down there, but it's not what they're telling us.
Yeah, and I don't think it's meant for good.
No.
I think there's something else going on.
If they can figure out a way to fuck with the fabric of existence, they will do it because that's their whole purpose here is to try to get out of here, to rip that veil, to, you know, break that glass ceiling above us. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So that, you know, again, in 1990, and I'll go over some of these things, many ways was a year when on one level, real peace was heralded, freedom and reconciliation with the all the good things that were happening in South Africa with Mandela's release and the end of apartheid was taking place that year. Germany reunified in 1990, and basically the Soviet Union was beginning to dissolve in 1990. Sounds good, right? According to what we've been taught. But these are some of the other things that have happened. And at the same time, all that was going on, you had a lot of genocide still going on in like in Azerbaijan between the Armenians and the Azerbaijanis. You know, the republics, the Soviet Union was starting to break off into these republics, but there was a whole lot of fighting going along with that. And then there was a lot of socialist influence coming into different governments. And so, like in Yugoslavia, the main Communist Party dissolved, but then it was replaced by little communist parties and socialist parties in the former Yugoslavia, which led to a lot of the genocide and ethnic cleansing that happened there between the individual republics in the 90s. So I'm going to be looking into that. So again, it sounds good. You know, it sounds all these steps are being taken to free us finally from the horrors of socialism and communism. And then there's these weather events going on. A big storm in Europe in January, a tornado outbreak in June, a tornado outbreak in March, another tornado in August. You know, big ones.
Wow.
F5s are in these guys.
Wow.
Earthquakes a month apart, one in Iran and one in the Philippines. Okay. So that's going on. And then you have, starting in the early 80s, you start having all these airplane crashes and hijackings and things going on. And so in 1990, in October, I found one in China. And then in December, I found one in Detroit. And they were from different causes, but the end result sure looks a lot the same to me. You know? So, you know, I definitely think there's more to this story. And I'm going to stop sharing here, where everything's being scripted, again, to kind of funnel us into this place where we are today, you know, where you have a percentage of the population that's just sound asleep and scared to death.
And
and then
entertained. That we're very entertained as well along the way to deviate us from, okay, well, you're scared. Oh, that's great. Well, just go over here and watch TV for a while and you can forget about being scared. But that, you never take the time to dip away from all of this and do research. They're so scared that they're scared to research it. They don't want to know. It's like, but you have to know. You have to know in order to deal with it and get past it. Because if not, you're being complacent. You're allowing it to happen by shielding yourself from not knowing it.
I mean, what has taken place in our historical narrative, for the most part, is written down. Now, things can be changed, and I think they do that a lot. They're rewriting history as they go in a lot of cases. And I've heard that about Wikipedia and other things, but there's still good data to be found there about what's been taking place. Mm-hmm. So, it's recognizing patterns. It's starting to put things together. It's kind of looking at, oh, wait a minute, is this normal? Going to a discotheque and having the disco blow up, is that normal? Or a theater or a ball game, or places where the entrance or the exits are locked shut. This kind of thing's been going on, where there have been fires and stampedes, and it sounds awfully fishy to me.
Yeah.
And knowing what we know now in 2021 with what we knew, like what I knew in the 80s and 90s, I would never have attributed any of this stuff to a false flag or an intentional event. And now it's like, yeah, they would do that. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I've noticed, though, you don't hear about plane crashes much anymore as you used to. I mean, you'd always hear about something with a plane crashing or something, and now it's few and far between. Also, one of the things that I remember back in the 80s and the early 90s was house fires. People's houses burning down from cigarette smoking. Now, granted, I know people have smoke alarms and all this stuff like that now and everything, but these are just things that were always prevalent before that seem to have tapered off. It seems like certain areas of time, like say you're talking about the 80s and the 90s, maybe they would have been high frequency times with maybe the alignments and stuff and the energy grid system being strong at those points, that they had to create as much strife as they could at those particular times with these high energy frequencies to counterbalance that positive energy that would be arising then that would help us wake up. Instead, they forwarded it down with all this wars and scare tactics and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know, but it just seems like you have these clusters of events that happen through time where maybe there's these ebbs and flows of strong energies coming in and they want to, squash that.
Right. And I think you're right. And I think so, what happened in the 60s with the hippie movement, flower power is a really good example of that, and how that got twisted and turned around. I think that's happened a number of times where, there have been opportunities for mass awakening and something has happened, and they just do that. They hijack and they weaponize and turn the narrative around.
So I want to switch gears a little bit back to the landscape and volcanoes. I have done research into volcanoes on my end. I did an in-depth stream on Vesuvius and Pompeii and Herculaneum. What I found with Vesuvius is that it was a giant building of some sort. And how I know this is because I started looking at the mineral layers, supposedly in Vesuvius, and I actually found an embedded statue head within the mineral layers. And so I want to know what your take is on volcanoes. Do you think that these may be buildings on the grid that melted down that could still be hot spots on the grid, since this was a recent event and not an ancient event that took place? How does that factor into this whole grid system? And what's your take on it?
Well, it's a good point. I have found volcanoes tracking alignments. So I found a series of volcanoes in southern France that I didn't know existed. And I found a series of volcanoes in southern Australia that I didn't know existed. Of course, we know about the volcanoes in Hawaii. And I followed an alignment right through the Hawaiian Islands
That's interesting you mentioned that, because Mauna Loa in Hawaii, it had I looked at that volcano also, and when you look at personal footage of people traveling up there, there's structure everywhere. You can just see. They call a lot of them what do they call them? Windbreakers. These standing columns of what looks like volcanic rock stacked up, but yet they all have right angles, and you can tell it's melted brick. There's one spot up on Mauna Loa called Jagger Cave, which is not a cave. It actually looks like the basement of a building with melted steps and everything. And they call it, they tell somebody came up here in the 30s and built this so they could watch the volcano erupt. Are you freaking kidding me? Like, you know.
Well, like I said, I think the ancients were very advanced. I think they knew how to work with energy. I think they groomed the energy of the earth into sacred geometry, and they could very well have built pyramids over these points, and then used the energy, the magma and whatnot, called the blood of the earth, the veins of the earth, because that's what it reminds me of, for creation purposes. There's a place outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico, up in northern New Mexico. It's called El Malpais, and it might extend down the mountains there. But I've driven back and forth. I live in Sedona, Arizona, so it's about a 5-6 hour drive from where I live to Albuquerque, and I pass right by that area. And I stopped by there, and within the black of what you would call the lava are block shapes.
Yeah.
Within. So they look like megalithic stone blocks within this,
like a lava field.
In this lava field, yeah.
No, I've seen that many times. And now I was thinking about when I did do my my live stream on Vesuvius, I was like, well, what could this have been? What type of building could this have been? And the only thing that I could equate Vesuvius and a lot of these other volcanoes to is the Tower of Babel. When you look at the Tower of Babel and the etchings for that and everything, it's very volcano looking. It's very cone looking. Now, I'm not saying that Vesuvius is the Tower of Babel. I'm saying it may be one of many towers that existed on the grid system, that when it fried, these things melted down and flowed out over everything.
And I've seen pyramidal shapes as well. So like if you look at Mount Tiede, Tiede in the Canary Islands, I found a picture of it with its shadow being like a perfect pyramidal shape. Wow. And then I saw the same thing at another volcano in Oregon. And again, if you look at the shadow, not necessarily the mountaintop, but if you look at the shadow of it, it's like that. So yeah, I definitely think you're onto something there. And like I said, they knew what they were doing as builders, and so what they knew will never. Well, it would be nice if we got back to that level of understanding again, but they could work with all the elements, I'm sure.
Well, what you were talking about with the reason for these wars is to really destroy things and hide things and everything like that. In 1944, they say Vesuvius erupted again. Now, they consider it an ancient volcano that originally erupted in 79 AD, which, of course, that's his story, his timeline. This component most likely melted down when the grid fried. But gosh, I just keep losing my train of thought. So in 1944, the World War II, the Allied forces, which was us, our planes were over in Italy because Italy was on the side of Germany and stuff. So we have our planes flying around Vesuvius, and there's pictures of this before, during, and after the eruption. I'm surmising from the research that I've done and the things that I found within Vesuvius now today, after this 1944 event that took place, I found stuff in Vesuvius that like the statue had bedded in the mineral layers. What I'm thinking is that people were going up to this thing, they were looking in, and they were seeing things in there that shouldn't be in there. So they came along in 1944 and dropped a few bombs in this thing to make it look like there was a mild, small eruption going on, which clearly made it look like it's still active, and also got rid of whatever was still in there. Because if you just type in Vesuvius mineral layers, there's two pictures that are going to pop up on the first line. And this happened just the other day. I proved it to everybody how easy it is to find this stuff. On the second picture in from Vesuvius mineral layers, when you zoom in on that one, you can see a statue head embedded in the mineral layers. And I've shown this to many other people. They agree that it is definitely some sort of a face statue head. Also, it looks like there even may be gold around it, gold that maybe have melted around this thing. Now people say, well, it could be sulfur from the volcano. I don't know what it is. I'm just saying it's goldish colored. But this is how easy it is to find something in there. Now, if I could find that today in picture number 2 on the first thing that comes up, imagine what people might have seen inside this thing before they decided to make it look like it popped off again in 1944.
Isn't the internet great?
It is amazing. I'm like, I have a magnifying glass. I'm looking at these mineral layers, right? And I'm like, there's got to be something here. And I'm like, I showed my husband. I'm like, what? He's like, it looks like a statue. So what I did was I compared it to other statues. I've even inverted the color on the picture so it brings out the statue head more out of the. It's already easy to see anyway, but and compared it to other statue heads, side profiles, and stuff, and that looks like what I'm almost 100% sure that's what I found.
Yeah. The internet has been instrumental for me, but also going out and doing my own field research, especially when I first started figuring all this stuff out. I learned so much more by going out into the field and visiting places and seeing what was there. And, it's like when you're a willing vessel, the universe wants to get this information back out and it just comes pouring in. And, it's there. You just kind of have to shift your perception and be willing to be open to what we've been told may not actually be the truth.
Yeah, there's a bigger picture here, and you have to be open and ready to be able to see it. And you can't see it in its entirety when you wake up. It's a process that unfolds before you as you continue on through the research. And, like you said, there could be something that you remember from 10 years ago, but you didn't know what to do with that information, just kind of filed away. And then you come upon something today and it's like, oh, wait, let me pull that back out because this seems to fit in now, It's amazing time to be here. Absolutely, 100%. And you have to rise above the negativity that's trying to suppress us down and realize that, life is beautiful. Life is what we make it. And in order to make it what we want it to be, we have to release ourselves from the deception. There's this great statue that in a tall tale that he mentioned that I'm very familiar with, which is Release from Deception. That statue that looks like an impossible carving. The person has like a net over them. And it's made out of, I think it's made out of granite. I'm not sure, but it's just unbelievably carved. It almost looks like somebody was turned to stone with this net over them. That's how perfect it is,
And Satan is very, 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 very wily and good at lying. And what they say, even the elect shall be deceived.
Yes.
And that's what I see with people I'm close to in my family that are, very, very versed in the Bible, very versed in a lot of things, and do not see it.
They still can't see it. Yeah.
Can't see it.
Mount Chiha, or what they call Mount Chiha, which is really a melted building, lives about 5 miles from my house, and I've been up there a few times doing video coverage up there. Mortar lines everywhere up there. And I've gone down the hardest trails that you can go in on that mountain and veered off of those trails. And when you veer off of some of these trails and see what's hiding in the locations that nobody really goes to, when you get up under the underbellies of some of these massive rocks and stuff, you can see mortar lines everywhere. It's crazy.
Right. And I think you're bringing up a good point. It's not just volcanoes, it's mountains in general.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then when you get to crystals and things like that, a lot of times, and gold and silver, they're right next to these mortar lines.
Yeah.
Mines are actually ancient masonry because they knew how to grow crystals and things like that.
Well, I was thinking too that, whatever was in these buildings when the X Factor event took place, that's what I call it, grid meltdown, whatever. We just kind of generalize it and say the X Factor event. When this meltdown took place, the grid melting down. So you have the building, massive buildings, we can't even imagine how high these buildings were because they're melted down now. But so you have the grid cooking underneath, right? So everything down here is super hot and it's melting from the bottom up. You got the pressure of the building weighing down on it. So you have heat and pressure. And I think a lot of these crystals were formed through that heat and pressure and whatever was on the interiors of these buildings, because I don't know what these buildings were made of on the very interiors. I mean, not the brick structure itself, but the interiors, like inside your house, you have all this stuff, even though it might be made out of brick, standing structure wise, but there's all this interior stuff. So, I mean, and then all the gold that we find today, if you look at it, it's melted. You can see that it was melted. And these buildings we know had gold within them. Our components on our keyboards now, on our circuit boards now have gold interlaced within them. Well, if you take something like Seville Cathedral, which is pre-X Factor, clearly, this cathedral, it has a wall of gold in it. His story for that is that the conquistadors went over to the New World, stole all the gold, came back and gilded their cathedral with this gold. They have to have a reason for this gold. They have to explain it somehow, and they tack on his story to it. But if that cathedral would have melted down during the X Factor event, you would have a massive vein of gold right there. They actually say there's 44 tons of gold just in Seville Cathedral, and this is in Spain.
Yeah, and it's amazing it's still there, because I know the Coricancha in Cusco, Peru, used to have gold. It's an amazing building, in spite of that. But
I think all the domes were gold. I think the gold rush was to rush out there to get the gold down off of a lot of these places and take it away.
And I think to dig out from the mud flood. I think that was part of it too.
Yeah, well, they had to get in there, clean everything up, take the tech down. They don't need the tech anymore. It's Baroque. They like to say Baroque architecture. It's Baroque. That's Baroque. Right. It's working. We don't need all of it.
Good point. Yep, there's a lot to be found in language.
Yes, yeah. Well, when I found that word Baroque, this type of architecture, I'm like, wait a minute, let me Google the pronunciation, and she's like, Baroque, and I'm like, because it's broke. It used to work, but it doesn't now. It's Baroque.
And that was part of my waking up to all of this. I mean, a bluff is a bluff. So a bluff is ancient architecture, but they're bluffing us.
Yeah, exactly.
They called it a bluff.
Yeah.
If you look at Cameron's Bluff at Mount Magazine in Arkansas, and this is really where I woke up to that, State Park, this massive ancient wall. It's so ancient, it's hard to tell, but there are places that you can tell that it's a built structure.
Right.
And it's called Cameron's Bluff. And that's how they've hidden it in language. Bluff, mesa, natural anything, natural falls, a natural window, natural steps.
There's melted steps everywhere.
Trying to divert you from the fact that they're not natural. And mesas, canyons.
How archaeologists and archaeologists and geologists have to at some point collide with each other, because you'll have a wall, right, that they say is a natural geological feature, but yet it tapers right into melted bricks and deformed. It's they know, they have to know, or they're
the deception goes deep, and academia is in it.
Sure. I think all geologists should be fired.
They're part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think they got some stuff right, but when I see two guys sitting on the side of a riverbank and they're scraping the walls of the riverbank, saying that this is the Cretaceous and this is this, and I'm like, they're brick lined, they're mortar lines. Yeah. What are you talking about?
Sedimentary rock is like flattened masonry.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think it's masonry. And, again, you just have to look at pictures and everything with a different eye, but it's there.
Absolutely. Well, I had a great time talking to you about this stuff. I hope we can do this again one day. Absolutely.
Sure.
This is awesome. I'm just trying to look real quick here to see. Oh, we didn't get into rivers and canals, but I have to ask you, have you ever looked at Chambord in France? They
Well, I
say
mean,
that.
I've looked at the chateau there.
Yeah. So they say that the Chateau Chambord was built in 1519, or at least that's when construction was started. But they don't mention the huge canal that leads into Chambord, goes completely around it. This whole thing is sitting on a giant square platform, like kind of like Angkor Wat, where it's surrounded by that huge moat, right? But it's really a canal. It's all man-made. Chambord is just another thing that's just amazes me. His story doesn't match with the time frame, what they had to work with. I mean, this is a massive undertaking just to build the platform that the chateau sits on. And then you have the massive canal system. These people didn't, they just traveled right down the canal and pulled right up to where they were going.
His story falls apart the moment you start putting your attention on it. If you have, if you're thinking critically,
absolutely,
and that story again is repeated all over the earth because that type of architecture existed all over the earth.
It sure did. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on with me. We're about 2.5 hours in here, and we had at least 100 people. We still have 96 people here. Guys, if you have not subbed and belled to Michelle Gibson's channel, you need to go back and look at all her work, and I'm sure you're going to have many more videos coming out in the future that I can't wait to see. And I just want to thank you again from the bottom of my heart for coming on here with me and talking with me.
You're welcome, and I'm really grateful for the invitation. So we'll do it again sometime.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. I love you guys. We're out of here, and let it not be said that we stood by and did nothing. The apocalypse is happening now, and it's happening through us. We are the ones we've been waiting for, and we're here, and it's happening right now. I love you guys. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Yep, and that means everybody out there listening, you're part of it too.
That's right. We are the apocalypse. All right, we're out. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
See if I can end the broadcast. All right, guys. I don't know if I'm going to end this or not, if it's working. Thank you. I love you guys.